Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. We've got men's Ashes news, two huge name international retirements from the women's game, a dramatic round of the county championship, interviews with Josh Bohannon and Tara Norris, some IPL chat, a huge result in the ODI World Cup Super League, and much more. I'm Rana, and with me today is Katya, Witney, Phil Walker, and Ben Gardner. Let's start with that men's Ashes news. Jofra has returned home from the IPL and has been replaced by Chris Jordan. Archer played a grand total of 5 matches over the course of just over a month. As discussed last week, the hope that he'll play a major part in the Ashes is looking increasingly optimistic. Back in England, Olly Stone is undergoing a scan this week for a potential hamstring injury picked up in Notts' draw against Lancashire. Ben Stokes said in that interview with NASA a few weeks ago that he wanted a pool of 8 or so seamers to draw upon in the Ashes, but he also stated his desire that his ideal team balance would have at least one very, very quick bowler in it. With those injury concerns, he might not get that wish. Mark Wood is not playing at the moment, but he's not injured.
He's having a baby, that's why.
He's having a baby. Ben, how big a deal do you think those 2 injuries could be? We don't know the severity of either of them at the moment, but neither of them have played much cricket at all in the last couple of years. As exciting as those 2 and Wood are, England do pretty well without them in home test matches.
Yeah, but I mean, beyond the pace thing, they're just 2 exceptional bowlers, right? I mean, Archer, his amazing entry into test cricket in the 2019 Ashes wasn't just because he bowled really quickly. And actually, the games when he bowled the quickest were not the ones when he had the most dramatic impact in terms of wickets. That was at Headingley when he kind of dialed his pace down, focused on control, got the ball like moving in a kind of traditional way. And I think that's the shame about Archer. We haven't got to see how he can develop from that point of view as a test bowler. And similarly with Stone, like I think there is some evidence that although he's can be, you know, just as fast as Archer, maybe a shade under what Mark Wood can bowl. There is also, you can kind of see how he could be just as suited to English conditions. Like he can, you know, he is honed in county cricket and he has had some excellent county championship campaigns. So from that point of view, it's a really big blow. And also maybe before this England side, you could say that England could cause Australia a lot of trouble with, you know, 3 bowlers who nibbled it about and could swing it and make use of English pitches and in English dukes. But Stokes is also, it's not just that he wants that balance of the attack, it's that he wants these fast, flat pitches. And if you're going into those with either Mark Wood on the back of, you know, 4 back-to-back tests or without an express quick bowler or with an express quick bowler who is unproven if they end up going deeper into the reserves and picking someone like Jamie Overton, Bryden Castle to keep a mood, then, you know, that is, it's a blow. I mean, it's something that they can negotiate. But yeah, Archer and Stone, very good bowlers. Not having them even just in the arsenal to call upon would be a shame.
I guess that you're always going to get injuries with fast bowlers, but I'm kind of imagining how the summer might pan out. You can see a world where a couple of players like Sam Curran or Chris Woakes, who haven't really been involved in the Ben Stokes era at all, could actually potentially play quite prominent roles in the summer. Do you think, Katya?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, who are those 8? So he wanted 8. Who are those 8, and what's their kind of fitness at the minute? So what a month out? So you've got Robinson, Broad, Anderson, Archer, Wood. Beyond that,
probably Stone and Potts out of people who've been in squads recently.
So that's 7.
Yeah, Woakes and Curran sort of nipping around. I guess Fisher did play a test, but he's probably a little bit off. Jamie Overton last summer and Craig Overton as well. So there are bowlers, but yeah, there's levels of quality, I guess, isn't there?
Yeah, you could definitely see them dipping into that kind of reserve kind of ranks. And like you said, the people who haven't had much of a go under Stokes. I mean, as well, if he's asking for fast, flat pitches, I don't exactly know how much that would suit someone like Sam Curran, let alone, like, you know, Broad and Anderson and those kinds of people. So it is a worry, definitely. But whether you buy into the whole fast, flat pitches are going to be prepared or not, then that's kind of up for debate, right?
Yeah, Phil, I was going to ask, what do you make of all the Stokes pitch chat, him wanting fast, flat pitches against an Australia side who's got a pretty good record on fast and flat pitches?
There's fast and flat in England, and there's fast and flat in Australia. The best will in the world. The quickest pitches here are nothing like they are at Brisbane or Centurion in South Africa. Also, there's a load of bluster and a load of bolshiness in the build-up to this sort of stuff, and it's very Stokesian to say, of course, we want to beat them at their own game. We want hard, fast pitches, because hard, fast pitches equate to, macho, foot to the floor, chest out sort of cricket, which is obviously what they're playing. But he's also a lot cuter than that. And what was interesting when I heard it is that it sort of explodes the notion that there is any distance between a captain and a curator. There's very little gap between them, especially when that captain is someone as powerful as Stokes. I think Archer's the big loss, obviously. And as Ben rightly says, it's about quality as much as pace here. And Archer's quality is unquestioned. It's really dispiriting to see what's happening with him. It's probably worth mentioning, and obviously this is driven by adrenaline, and it doesn't begin to even look like anything that you can do in white clothes, but he did bowl a couple of deliveries that were about 94, 95 mile an hour out of pure frustration, I think. And obviously the mornings after and the evenings after he's doing these things and struggling through those games for Mumbai, he was clearly in a lot of discomfort. But notwithstanding Archer's loss, England still have a whole cohort of options. And I think the Woakes question is interesting. Woakes is as fit as he's ever been. His record in England, as we know, is phenomenal. He's always done okay in Ashes Test matches as a third, fourth seamer. And also, crucially, he bats at 8 or 9 as well. And England's got quite a long tail. So I think Woakes absolutely comes into the picture. I saw him bowl last week for Warwickshire, or maybe the week before. But I saw him recently, and he looks good to go for me.
He picked playing the county championship over possibly playing the IPL, so he's
taking
and he
it
extremely seriously.
He contacted Stokes personally and said, "Look, what do I need to do?" Woakes and others definitely come into the mix. No doubt, in an ideal world, you have that mixture in your attack, and you have a spearhead that can, pick a ball up that's 50 overs old and change the direction of the game. But I think in the end, you would rather have someone bowling medium fast in Woakes than someone bowling, say, fast medium in, say, I don't know, to be harsh, Jamie Overton, who could be effective but would also go at 4.5, 5 and over. But look, we will see. We will see how it all carves itself up. There is that definitely there is that concern about a toothlessness to the attack if there isn't an out and out quick. But this is England. There's always ways to take 20 wickets. Always in England.
Although the pitches in England in the last 2 years, Test pitches have been flatter than I think they have been in the past. But I was just thinking, whilst you're saying that, Phil, I would love if things go pear-shaped after 1 or 2 Test matches, England are 1 or 2-0 down, just play on a pudding with an attack of Anderson, Robinson, Rushworth and Sam Cooke, and come on, Australia, what can you do on that?
But the other thing though with the Aussies, with Hazlewood in particular, but they'll have Nisa probably not in the squad. Can't remember. But
He's not in the squad, but he'll be in the country.
He's obviously tearing it up here as it stands.
Scott
Boland is in the squad. These are English style bowlers up to a point. They're just a little bit bigger, stronger, more strapping, and have more chiseled jaws. But they are English style bowlers in that they hit a certain length and they let the ball do the work.
It'd be great if they both just read the pitch in dramatically different ways. England turn up that first test with an attack of Wood, Stone and Archer, and Australia have picked Boland, Nisa and Hazlewood. On Archer, I think there's a bit of doomerism about, people will say let's just, forget about him ever playing Test cricket ever again, is sort of a thing you kind of hear people say, that obviously he does need to be handled with the utmost of caution. And, any decision taken has to be taken with a long-term view in mind, not with a view of, can we get Archer through this one game and then deal with it afterwards. But also, there's an element with injury stuff when sometimes injury comebacks are not linear, right? And that if you have had a long time out of the game, your body can just react a little bit to when you put it through stress it hasn't been through in the last few years. And that doesn't mean that he's all of a sudden back to square one, which is how it's kind of felt. People have discussed this latest setback, which could, and I think that was part of his frustration with the reporting on the minor operation he had in his elbow, because he felt that was minor. That was something that needs to be done, and it was part of the recovery process rather than, again, him being, that shows he can't handle the rigours of bowling at that speed and at that level. And that, you do see bowlers who go through a long, long time of being injured And then even if they just have that brief sort of like 2-3 year spell when everything's kind of not, pain free, because it's never pain free for a fast bowler, but as pain free as it can be, and they're, bowling their hearts. I mean, that's kind of what we've had with Wood, right? Like you could have easily said the same thing about Wood up until 2019 when he's, you'd sort of seen glimpses of what he can do, but not much. And then actually since then, like when he's been on the park, he's been, one of England's best test bowlers. And and you go back to like Pat Cummins is another example of a guy, makes a debut in 2010, 2011, doesn't play another test for 6 years. And you could easily think like, well, let's not have, you could easily just say this guy should never play another test match. And I almost think that is less helpful than just like saying, let's just take it as it comes. Let's be cautious, but let's just think that actually sometimes players do recover from injuries.
Nobody knows though. And
sure.
And it's all wild speculation. Clearly the parameters of Archer's career have changed. It's 4 years ago now that he was here during that summer. If we can forget for a second what he did in the World Cup, where he changed the course of English cricket, what he did in the 2 or 3 weeks after that was phenomenal. And people were talking after that Lord's spell against Steve Smith as a generational fast bowler across all formats. Well, clearly the parameters have shifted dramatically now. And we have to just think about the boy himself, really, and just hope that he gets as much cricket out of the next few years as he possibly can to make himself, to maintain that love that he had for the game when he first began, and that sort of innocence that you saw when he came into that England side, and that vim and vigour and all the rest of it. If he can get back to that, whoever he's playing for, whether it's Mumbai or a bit of Sussex or the odd England one-day game, or maybe it's 100 England one-day games, or maybe he's fit for 4 or 5 weeks in India for that World Cup, fingers crossed, but he never plays another test match. If that's it, then sure, there's a poignancy to it, but that's so often how these kinds of careers go, and I just feel a bit uncomfortable with that constant speculation about it when we don't know what his case is. We can speculate about the impact of an elbow injury on somebody who bowls that quick, and we can wonder if you can ever come back from that. But it's just not fair to speculate on those questions when we just don't know. One person's back problem is another person's elbow problem. One person's ankle problem is another person's knee problem. And it's just, I don't know. I just think we should just let the boy figure it out himself, and you just cross your fingers for him.
I think one note of optimism, though, is a year or so ago when he wasn't playing any cricket at all, like a massive worry people had was, are we going to see him bowl at 90 plus miles per hour again? And I remember, Ben, you wrote the piece about his England comeback. It was day one, straight away, he was bowling at the speeds that we know he can bowl. I
would also add, though, on that, if, as you see with a million quicks in the past, he's not able to regularly touch those sorts of pace, those sorts of speeds again. He showed at periods during that Ashes 2019 that he could bowl fast medium and be just as effective because his control was so good. So while you'd lose something magical, you wouldn't necessarily lose the bowler. So again, that's another crumb of comfort.
I do get that, but I think there has been quite a fixation for the last 8 months to a year of this Ashes series and Archer. Everything's been spoken of in terms of him coming back to this Ashes series, and I do wonder whether that's helpful or not, because as soon as there's a story about that elbow injury, it's framed in the context of the Ashes, and it's almost like he's become this mythological being of like that image of Steve Smith on the floor last year at Lord's, or his role in that Headingley Test match, and it's like we're pining for that again.
It's not fair, is it?
It's not really fair. It's not fair at all, and it also frames every cricket he does as lesser if he doesn't play in that Ashes series. Whereas, as you said, whatever he's achieved to come back from such a serious injury is remarkable, and to bowl at 94, 95 for Mumbai Indians is really, really good. So if we could chill out a little bit on the Ashes, and it's what we do every single time there's an Ashes series, it's hyped up as Johnny Bairstow's got to be fit, Archer's got to be fit, all these people have got to be fit, when in reality you can win with Johnny Bairstow, with Jofra Archer, without them too. So it should be more about the individual rather than what they could bring to a series that in the grand scheme of things is only a step. There will be more cricket, basically.
And I think you're absolutely right, and I think there's almost building him up for an almighty fall when eventually he does return to Test cricket. Like, at the end of the day, he hasn't played for so long, and like the idea of what Jofra Archer is as a Test bowler will just be slightly different to what the reality even was when he was playing and fully fit. Moving on, just after we recorded last week's pod, Katherine Sciver-Brunt announced her retirement from international cricket. She enjoyed a 19-year England career spanning several eras. She took 335 wickets for England, holds the record for the most T20I and ODI wickets for the England women's team. She won 3 World Cups. She was player of the series when England won the 2005 Ashes. A remarkable career in many ways. Ben, Phil and Katya have each chosen a Katherine Sciver-Brunt moment from her career that kind of sums her up in a way. Katya, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I picked the 2 for 4 against New Zealand in the Commonwealth Games last year, first match, slightly narcissistically because I was there, but mainly because it was the last example I could think of her in her absolute pomp, and that spell was absolutely ridiculous. She opened the bowling against a really experienced New Zealand top order who had actually scored quite a lot of runs in the competition by that point, and she was just absolutely unplayable. She took out Sophie Devine's leg stump in the first over for a ball that pitched on off stump, and where I was in the crowd I was kind of like at backward point, and I saw that the stump was brilliant stump cartwheel. Look it up on YouTube, it's on there. And then she came back in the second over and took out Amelia Kerr's middle stump. And it was a wicket maiden. It was a brilliant spell. Nearly cleaned up Maddie Green as soon after as well. And it was just supreme skill. And what I liked about that spell as well, that Izzy Wong came on at the other end after that second over and took out, I think it was Susie Bates. And it was quite a nice handing over it felt like a handing over of the guard. And I think that's with her retirement as well. It feels like it's time. It feels like there's this great, exciting new crop of England fast bowlers coming through, and they're ready to kind of take over that mantle that she's held on to for so long and done so well. And for all that we'll miss the passion that she brings to the field. And in that spell as well, she was really pumped up, screaming. And you can debate, about whether she always uses that aggression in the most positive way on the field, but that was really, really good. And yeah, so we'll miss what she symbolises for England cricket every time she steps onto the field. But it very much does feel like it's time, and she's done the retirement well.
I mean, Phil, your moment that you're picking out is from 17 years before the moment that Katya picked. It says something in itself.
Well, this is it. So 2005 Worcester Ashes Test match. England won by 6 wickets, and Katherine and Isha Guha put on 80 odd for the final wicket to get a lead of about 70 or 80. I should have the scorecard up here, but I don't. But Isha talks about that partnership that they had as fondly as she talks about any other moment in her career, and the two of them were roommates at the time, and they were not out overnight, and then they batted for another hour and a half the following morning. This was after Brunt had already taken 5 for in the first innings, and this is against a side, Stalaker and Nietzsche and Fitzpatrick and so on. So some brilliant cricketers. And then she took 4 in the second innings to basically nail that game. So 9 for and a 50 odd, woman of the match. And she would have been, 21, 22 probably at that point, and still just really making her way in the game. But she was already changing the face of it. I was writing about her yesterday, and I said something like, she was, in the amateur era, she had a professional edge to her, and in the professional era, she maintained the love of the game for playing's sake. And so much of the last few years, after she'd achieved everything she possibly could have done anyway, and as she says, eclipsed all her wildest dreams, she was still playing it because she fundamentally loved it, and that devotion to it was maintained all the way to the end. I think it will also be maintained into the future because she's a natural talker. She's cheeky and naturally irreverent and speaks with great sort of colour, and so she's going to be a brilliant commentator if she fancies it. And obviously she straddles, as a number of those female cricketers do, but she straddles those two eras. I interviewed her a few years ago, and she never. I asked her about the money thing, and she said something like, "I only ever thought about money when we started to make some. It had never occurred to me about money before professionalism started to creep into the game." And until then, she'd always just screamed and argued and swung it late and fallen out and in and out and in with various captains, purely because this was her purpose. There was no additional motive. She wasn't interested in money or fame. She was born to do that thing, and it made her life make sense. As she said to the BBC upon the announcement of her retirement, it saved her life. You know, she grew up in a staunchly sort of conservative religious household in Barnsley. She knew early on that her sexuality would become an issue for the cohesiveness of the family. She was bullied relentlessly at school for her weight. Her dad encouraged her to go running. She went running 3 times a week and managed to ride out those tough years of school and was ready to go. And the fact that we know all of this and that we know her personal story and the extraordinary love story of her and Natalie having declared their feelings for each other on the balcony after the World Cup. I mean, you could, if you wrote this, you'd get it thrown out as a Mills and Boon novel. I mean, it's phenomenal, really. But we know all of this because she's so open and she's so frank and she's so brutally honest about all of her experiences, good, bad, and challenging, and so on. There'll never be anyone else like her. She's a total one-off.
Just on that 2005 Ashes series with her, that was the first, I would have been 6 at the time, and that was the first time I was aware there was an England women's cricket team, because it was on the news, and I remember very early memory of watching a news report with Katherine Sciver-Brunt and an interview she did.
On that though, have you tried to find any footage of the game itself?
No, I haven't actually.
Right, so because I was thinking about it yesterday, I went looking and I can't find any footage at all of that 2005 Ashes Test match. That brilliant game, you know, with great cricketers whose names are household names in the story of female cricket, and there's no footage of it whatsoever. This is at the same time where everyone else was talking about cricket in the round that summer, and tellingly, this landmark cricket match was taking place and there wasn't even a camera there to record it. Or if there was, there's certainly no evidence of it now that I could find.
I think it's absurdly recent that highlights of women's cricket exists online in a reliable way. So I think even the 10-11 Ashes, you basically can't find anything. I think there's maybe like a 2-minute highlights thing that exists in the entire Test match, if that. Yeah. I mean, so Ben, your moment is slightly more recent, and I guess one of the interesting things about her career and her England career in particular is I find the post 2017 phase interesting, in that so many of that team have retired and there was quite a big, quite fast transition, but she kind of resolutely led the attack for alongside Shrubshaw, obviously for a very long time after that World Cup win.
Yeah, there was longevity, obviously there's also adaptability. I mean, Phil mentioned her batting in that first Test match, but she became an integral part of England's T20 side as a batter who could be the finisher that team needed at that time. But my moment is also from a Test match, from that amazing Test at the start of last year, and it's so she took 5-6 in the first innings, and the ball was to Annabelle Sutherland. That was just the perfect Test match ball, basically, that pitches, straightens, takes the top of off, and just reminded me just how skillful a bowler she was, as well as having such passion and sort of it's interesting that you both kind of touched on that, on how she would, like, the energy she would bring and her some of that behaviour on the field, because some England fans would not like that so much. And in that semi-final, I guess the last game she played for England, she did come under the scanner a bit for that, for her reaction to fielders making mistakes. But I think and obviously from a team point of view, I can see how that's not ideal. But also, I think there can be a sense of matter from some people I think don't actually follow women's cricket that closely, who will say that they like the women's game because it's it shows cricket's gentler side, perhaps, or it can be like a bit of a nicer place. And Katherine Brunt is the ultimate counter argument to that, in a way that I think you couldn't watch her and think that this game didn't matter, that that this wasn't the thing that mattered basically the most in the world to this person. And that's the thing that stood out most, is I think was just that that passion that she that she had, along with obviously the skill and the longevity and the mountains of wickets and everything else that she achieved in her career.
But also that stuff. I mean, she's just an authentic individual, and she would argue with Charlotte Edwards on the pitch, and a number of cases well documented. She said to me once, "Yeah, I'd gone in the Swede." That's how she put it to me when she'd lost her rag at Edwards at one point because Edwards wouldn't give her another over. And yeah, she'd scream at the young kids, but she'd also scream at the old kids. She would be any number of personalities all at once, but everybody knew that she was authentic, and I think that's all you can ask for really with any sports person.
Well, Sciver-Brunt wasn't the only leading fast bowler in the women's game to announce her international retirement this week. South Africa's Shabnim Ismail also called it a day for her country. 191 ODI wickets at 19. Only Heyhoe Goswami has more in the women's game. 123 wickets at 18 in T20Is with an economy of less than run a ball. For some time now, one of the quickest, if not the quickest bowlers in the women's game. Katya, there have been a few high-profile retirements around South Africa over the past year or so, but I got the sense that this is the least surprising or dramatic from an outsider point of view. She's 34. She's a fast bowler. There are all these major franchise opportunities arising that just didn't exist 2 years ago. So it's understandable for her to prioritise that when these have arisen so late in her career.
Yeah, I guess. And I think you could also say with the World Cup in South Africa having just happened as well, and how well South Africa did in that World Cup and how well she did in that World Cup as well, on an individual level. And with these franchise tournaments opening up, I think especially with your value as a fast bowler in the women's game, there are a lot of opportunities that will open themselves up to you. And she's so good that she will get them, and she will be paid more money to do so than she's paid for South Africa, which is completely fair enough to go and earn your money. She's played for God knows how long, achieved a lot. And just on those stats you were saying, so she's the 5th bowler ever to take 300 wickets across international cricket in women's cricket. And those other names are people like Elise Perry and Heyhoe Goswami and Katherine Sciver-Brunt. She's the first South African to do it. She's a titan of women's cricket, and she's again spanned that era with Katherine Sciver-Brunt and the old guard, and she deserves every bit as much praise and as much adulation as Katherine Sciver-Brunt does, because what she represents for South African cricket is just as significant as what Katherine Sciver-Brunt represents for England cricket. And
you picked out a moment from her career as well.
Yeah, it was actually the game that she went past that 300 international wickets tally. She took last year in Ireland, she took 5 for 8 against Ireland, and she'd got 4 wickets, I think, within her first 3 overs. So the fact that it then took her till the last over of the game to get 5 for was actually, maybe she should have picked it up sooner. But Ireland aren't the most experienced international side. But what she demonstrated in that spell was just how far the gap was between specifically her and Ireland last year. She was unplayable. She completely dominated their top order in a way that not many bowlers can actually complete that whole domination. And Ireland can challenge anyone on their day. They beat Australia just before the World Cup. I think I'm right in saying they challenged England quite well in one of the games in the World Cup, or maybe I'm getting that mixed up with another side. In India?
I think they beat South Africa on that tour.
Yeah.
The first game.
Yeah. But she was just completely on it that day. 5 for 8. Incredible. I think we put it as number 2 on women's ODI spells of the year. I don't know what number 1 was, but probably pretty good.
Ben, you picked out a moment from the World Cup in her amazing spell in the semi-final.
In the semi-final, yeah. So this is basically the biggest win in South Africa women's cricket history, one of the biggest wins in South African cricket history, getting them into their first ever World Cup final, men's or women's. The moment I had was Ismail's second over, which I think was pretty much instantly hailed as probably the fastest over there has ever been in women's cricket history. It depends on what the decimal point was in the speed gun, whether she just touched 80 miles an hour, and the records aren't quite as fully kept for women's cricket, but I don't think, and it's not accepted that anyone has actually breached that mark. So that would be the fastest ball ever as well. going through the game, I was looking at it again, and the first over was almost like precision engineered to fire her up. So there was a misfield at mid-on that went for 4, and then a bounce that was kind of like missed by the keeper that went for 4 buys. And then she gets pulled from the attack and then brought back for the last over of the power play and just bowls at the absolute speed line. England got off to a flyer, so they're 53 for 0 after 5 overs. Then Ismail just changes the game, takes 2 wickets, concedes 2 runs. All of a sudden, England on the back foot, and then comes back for the last over with 13 to defend, does it with aplomb, and that's it. South Africa are in the semi-final. And yeah, I mean, for me, I think she is the fastest bowler there that I've seen in women's cricket, at least. I guess Katherine Fitzpatrick would be the one from a bit before my time, and also just in a way the one that most evoked that model of the traditional fast bowler. I think even more than Sciver-Brunt, just because of that speed that Ismail can reach at her peak. And in terms of South African cricket, it's the least unexpected, but there's also it's hard not to feel that narrative building, just because I guess they would have maybe planned for the succession after Ismail with the hope that you have these other senior players who can see the team through it. And now actually from that kind of core of, I suppose maybe you go to 6 players, and they do have obviously Laura Vulvart, who's young, who can hopefully helm a new era, and there's Sine Loose as well. But just with it following just after those, it's not shocking in and of itself, but it's just, you look at that South African team, it's hard to work out how it's changed so quickly and what it's going to kind of look like going forward. But you can't obviously it's great that we'll get to still see her in action, bowling as fast as she always does.
Moving on, a message from the Wisden shop. The Wisden shop is offering a limited time only deal on all cricket training equipment for you and your teammates to hone your skills for the 2023 season. Use code podcast20 for 20% off your order for this week only. Right, next up, the County Championship and an interview with one of the leading batters in the country right now. So this week was all about rear guards. Not Surrey and Northants all dug in to avoid final day defeats in Division 1. Stuart Broad blocked it for 3 off 50 to save knots against Jimmy Annis's Lancashire. Warwickshire were the only side in Division 1 to win. They obliterated Hampshire. At one point, Hampshire were 35 for 9 in the second innings before James Vince and Mohammed Abbas put on 16-2 for the 10th wicket, which wasn't nearly enough to avoid an innings defeat. Chris Rushworth took a 7 for there. Wokes in the wickets as well. Warwickshire now joint top of Division 1. It's a very compact table. Not that many results so far in the season.
James Vince, then. Do we have a moment?
Go for
Come
it.
on, let's take a moment. Let's take a Vince
Go for it.
moment. 186 against Northants and then 2 not outs in that stinker against Warwickshire. Obviously, there's no place for him, tragically, in that busy top 6, 7, 8, whatever England are. But my word, wouldn't it be nice to picture a free-flowing James Vince somewhere in that McCullum era? Wouldn't that be a beautiful thing?
I just know that as soon as you said James Vince, I reckon half our listeners
We haven't done him in ages.
kind of leant forward and go, God, yeah, nice. And then the other half just rolled their eyes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that happens whenever I open my mouth.
I want more whenever James Vince gets mentioned, I think, Phil. Maybe you're the James Vince of this podcast.
It's shut up. It's perfect Vincian timing, isn't it? Just at the wrong time, just to sort of dangle it tantalizingly, knowing full well that it doesn't really amount to anything in the end. And even those 2 not out knocks against Warwickshire, and I saw some of it, technically beautiful, brilliant, playing a different game to the rest, and yet in the end probably pretty empty and meaningless as his own team go down to an innings defeat. It's exquisitely Vince.
Yeah, I mean, he does that, and then the week before that, it was the week before the Northampton 100, he got out caught second slip playing exactly the same shot in both innings.
Yeah, at the Oval.
And I think those 5 innings probably perfectly sum up his career.
Indeed. Indeed.
So next up, I've got an interview with Josh Bohannon. I think he's a really interesting cricketer. So he's a leading run scorer in Division 1 this season. He averages 45 with the bat over 50 or so first-class matches. That's his entire career so far. He spent a fair bit of time with the England Lions, but I think really interestingly, since spending time with them over the winter, he has upped his scoring rate significantly. So he had a very good summer last year, but his strike rate was a lowly 47. This season, he's the leading run scorer in the country, and that strike rate's up to 70.
I just want to add, I spoke to Ben Folkes, who was on that A tour in Australia when England were stinking the place out, first team. And I asked him who stood out for him, and he said Bohannon was cut above all the other players there with the bat that he saw. And then he had a quiet year, didn't he, last year?
Compared to what he'd been doing before, yeah. But I mean, like, as we've said it on the pod loads of times before, there just aren't English players who average 45 in first-class cricket who don't play for England.
Sure.
Yeah, in another era, an era 2 years ago, I think he's already played a test match by now. Anyway, here is that chat with Bohannon. Josh, great to have you join us. Just asking about your game last week against Notts. Came so close to getting that victory. How are you feeling a couple of days after that? Pretty frustrating, I imagine, coming that close to victory.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we played some seriously good cricket, given how much rain we got and how much time affected in the game there was. Brody made a comment to Jimmy towards the end saying, "How have you got us 9 down on that sort of pitch?" And I thought, our efforts on the balls was amazing to put us in a position to come so close. And obviously, I think when you get that close, it almost feels worse than if you get a team like 4 or 5 down. So yeah, obviously a little bit of frustration in there, but like we keep saying, we're playing really good cricket, and it's a matter of time till we get over the line.
And it's been quite a weird start to the season with just, if you look around the country, there just haven't been many results at all. Obviously the rain's played a part in that, but you're 4 games into the season now out of 14. How do you feel the season's gone so far for Lancs?
Well, I mean, obviously, you could look at the table and you could tell 4 draws from 4, but the rain has played a massive part in that. We've had a good few days washed out in total, and to sort of be in positions that we have been, I think, it's been great. Obviously, we would like a couple of wins out of them 4 games, but again, I think we can only control what we can control, and playing good cricket is all we can do. And hopefully, if the weather holds off this week, we can put in another strong performance and try and get our first one. That might just give them a little bit of momentum moving forward.
Talk us through your knock in that first innings. So you kind of made a name for yourself as one of the most consistent run scorers in the country, as more of an accumulator. And here you're 21 for 1 against one of the best attacks in the country, and you score pretty much a runnable 70. Talk me through what goes through your head in that innings, and that, I guess, the change in approach to years gone by, maybe.
Yeah, I think I know exactly what people try and label it as, is that I'm trying to force my way into an England setup. It's not like that at all. I'm obviously trying to put in performances and try and get that recognition to try and play for England, of course. And obviously by putting strong performances in for Lancashire is obviously what I'm trying to do. And I just saw it as having learned things in the winter from being part of the Lions setup and being in the training camp before it in November. I think I suppose in a usual situation there on a pitch that, we got stuck into bat, it was overcast, green surface. There was always going to be a bit there. And I just thought, if I can get off to a decent start, hopefully it might just create something and make them miss a little bit more, search for something. And thankfully I was able to latch on to the balls that they did miss. And I think the rest of it is how I would normally bat anyway. And I just think that, that positive mindset and that positive intent allowed me to sort of play the way I played as such. And like you said, in other times I might have left balls and all of a sudden the scoreboard looked very different. But I just tried to play as positive as I could and do it to my strengths as best I could. And thankfully it came off. And obviously I would have liked more, but that's part of the game sometimes.
What was that camp with England like? I've spoken to some players, and I spoke to Ben Duckett, for example, who said that before he scored his 100 on the first day of the Pakistan series, there was literally no chat at all from the England team about how they wanted to play. So he kind of talked about it as being like an atmosphere that rubbed off, and he kind of understood what the philosophy was without anyone having to actually say that. What was it like spending those couple of weeks with the England squad?
Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, they make you feel confident about everything you do in the game, and they back it. And some of the, all the chat is about how we're going to try and win a game of cricket, and sort of in every situation, how do we be positive to try and win a game? And I think it does naturally make you think a little bit differently as well, because every time you're out there, you can go out there and just, almost whatever it is for you that looks as your strengths, and what that looks like for you to be positive and play with intent, etc. You can go and do that. And it's a really good place to be a part of. And obviously it's very different to being with your county, because, over 14 games of a season, and there's obviously different situations that you're a part of and where you are in the table, and all them sorts of things, and weather, etc. So it is a different environment, but it's something that I really enjoyed in the winter year, and I felt like I learned a lot from them 3 weeks and came back a better player, which is obviously the idea of going on trips like that.
And then what was that environment like on the later tour to Sri Lanka with the Lions? Lots of young, really talented players playing in that New England mould. Was that again something that was talked about specifically as a group? Were the coaches kind of talking about the merits of playing positively, or was that just something that you guys have kind of just picked up from that time with the senior England squad?
No, I think if you was a part of that training camp, it was obviously you knew what you had to do, but it was spoken about that everything that we do, we're trying to be positive, and we want to put their balls under pressure, and obviously vice versa, we want to put their batters under pressure with the ball, and that was quite clear, and it's just about doing it your way, and what, again, like I say, what looks like that for you, and just being smart around it as well, because obviously there are situations over there where you can't just start teeing it up. You've obviously got, there are times in a game where you've got to play certain situations, and I think by being positively in your movements and sharpness, and same with the ball as well, sometimes it does buy you that little bit of extra time, because you're scoring quicker, I suppose, than what the normal game would be. So you almost feel like sometimes you're sort of where you normally would be a lot earlier. But just on that tour as well, it was great fun to be a part of, because everything that we did, the innings that Jamie Smith played, the 100 there, and Tom Haynes, and the wickets that Tongi got, and all the seamers, it was just great to be a part of.
Oh, you said it at the start that you know how people are interpreting people like yourself scoring quicker, about these guys want to play for England, and they want to get the attention that way. But was it kind of a sense of like seeing this England team be so successful by being positive? It kind of opened your eyes a little bit to the positives of being of playing positively. Like you've obviously got the shots to score at that rate, and actually just feeling, almost getting the confidence to be like, yeah, this is actually the best way to play for myself.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, obviously watching it is extremely exciting, and you've obviously got to do stuff in the nets before you can obviously do it in games and make that a real strength of yours, because you are still spoken to, like certainly what I was spoken to about was, go and be positive and all that, but do it your way, do it to your shots. Don't try and invent something that you've never done before. Just go and play your way, and we back it. As an eye opener in terms of doing it, I suppose it's just, I think you'd get the vibe now that sort of everyone is trying to play I guess a slightly more positive brand of cricket. So naturally the game unfolds a slightly different pace than it has done in years gone by. So I obviously think that to keep up and try and win games, you've got to do that. And vice versa, there can be situations like the other day where you end up having to try and bowl a team out that are going for a draw, because we started so well with the ball. But obviously, being a small part of that with the Lions, and obviously trying to break into that full setup is extremely exciting. And, I just think, you can tell how much fun they're having. And, the morale within that squad and that group of players. So, yeah, it's I suppose really exciting for English cricket.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the really interesting things of the last year is, I think specifically almost seeing people rethink like what the number 3 position is, because I mean stereotypically in England at least people think of Jonathan Trott being the archetypal number 3, resolute, doesn't give you anything, someone who absorbs pressure all the time. As someone who bats for yourself and seeing how Ollie Pope's gone about it for England, he walks down the wicket like once and over, whatever. Have you had a rethink yourself about what that role could be and actually is in the red ball game?
Again, it's pretty simple for me. I try and I suppose I have obviously gone slightly more positive in that, and it's not about, for me, it's not about running down the pitch or necessarily walking at balls. I've messed around with where I'm setting up, and you know, necessarily I might bat outside my crease and then vice versa go deeper, and which I never really used to do in the past. It was almost like he bowls this pace, I'm going to try and set up here. So there has been changes there, and again to spin sort of, you know, back in different sweeps and stuff like that. But it's still the same way, and I'm quite simple with how I think about the game, and it is about, you know, how can I put a ball under pressure, and if he misses, can I smack it for 4 or 6? And in between that, can I get down the other end off his good balls so that he can't bowl me for a period of time? And I've always tried to think like that. I just think naturally with learning a little bit more about myself and about the game, I'm probably able to do that more regularly now than I've done in the past. And obviously, naturally with how the environment is, the freedom that we're given, and you know, here at Lancs, the freedom that we're given now and the chats that we have around it it's great to be a part of, and it just, you know, it's so much fun to go out there every time and see everything as an opportunity to put the bowlers under pressure and help us win a game of cricket.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for your time, Josh, and best of luck this week if you get on the park.
Thank you, mate. Cheers.
Ben, your moment of the week is from Johnny Bairstow's return. Do you want to talk about your moment of the week first and then tell us about Bairstow's match?
Yeah. Okay. So the moment itself was I actually didn't see it live. I sort of saw that it happened and then went and sought it out, which was Michael Neese's hat trick with Bairstow watching on at the other end. So the first ball is you know, very good, full straight. Milan misses it. LBW. Next one is a big in swinger, which is left alone and takes out the stumps. And then the next ball, you almost it's amazing because you wouldn't think you could forgive someone being bowled leaving on a hat trick ball when the person before has been bowled leaving the second ball of a hat trick. And yet when you watch it back, there's you can completely see why Don Best does it. It starts so wide and then veers back in so dramatically. Best can't believe it, but Neese, he just looks like, you know, that it's exactly what he planned for. And when you're on a hat trick ball, obviously the thing that you always want to do is, you know, bring the stumps into play, make the bat have to do something. And when that's the case and you start it that wide, it just takes some stones to do that. And yeah, that was that was just an amazing moment and made all the more brilliant for Bairstow being up the other end and then eventually stranded 20 not out. And you can sort of feel a bit of sympathy for him, except for the fact that the previous evening, I guess maybe it was a team decision to send out 2 night watchmen ahead of him, and both got out, and he still has to face 2 overs at the end of the day.
It was really dark. Yeah, like really, really dark.
Yeah.
And it was, and also he ran out Ben Code, the number 11 as well.
Yes, yeah. And also because then it gets promoted to number 3 in the second innings when Yorkshire are briefly thinking of trying to chase pretty much 500, right? And so he ends up being carded at number 5, batting at number 3 and number 7, which I guess averages out, and then making 20 not out, and then nothing in the next innings. But yeah, so a weird return for Bairstow, completely overshadowed by this incredible hat trick, like that, or Irfan Pathan. Remember that in the first over of a Test match against Pakistan, who bowled it. It was from the sort of the other side. He was bowling around the wicket, so swinging back into the right hander, if that makes sense, rather than moving it from way outside off. It kind of came from that was the curve instead. Those would be the 2 hat trick balls that stand out as being maybe the 2 best I've seen, I think.
And Yorkshire's still winless, but we've had 16 matches in Division 2 so far, and only 5 of them have been results. And Durham, it's 10th of May. Durham are the only team to have won more than one game in Division 2 so far. Moving on to the Steve Smith match, he made his debut for Sussex. The star of the show was Ollie Robinson, who took 14 wickets in the match, but Sussex couldn't quite seal victory. I'm going to make a controversial claim and say that Sussex are worse with Steve Smith in the team. So you can only field 2 overseas players, and Pajara, he's their long-standing player. He plays every week. But Smith is in the side instead of Australian seamer Nathan McAndrew. And in this game, Ollie Robinson took 14 for 117. The rest of the Sussex attack combined took 4 for 379, and they came pretty close to winning this game. McAndrew has been averaging about 20 with the ball this season. Smith only made 30 here. So if you've got McAndrew in the side instead of Smith as your second overseas, I would argue Sussex have got a better chance of winning. So arguably, Steve Smith has already cost Sussex promotion. Who knows? Who knows how the season will pan out? Smith made 30. And I think he was actually pretty unlucky with the LBW decision.
Yeah, a little bit.
I think it was possibly high and possibly leg side.
Yeah, both of those things.
There's a lovely bit of imagery in that match, actually, of Steve Smith getting slow clapped by the New Road crowd in his first innings when he didn't have the net guards attached to his helmet. And there was a quite significant break in play of about 10 minutes while these net guards were sorted out. And the commentator said at the time, the regulations in the Sheffield Shield are different. So he didn't have the net guards on. That's incorrect. So I don't know why he didn't have the net guards on, because I looked up the Sheffield Shield playing regulations, and the helmet regulations are exactly the same as they are in the county championship. So why he didn't have the net guards on, I don't know. But the New Road crowd weren't
It's a
happy.
living, Katya.
What other podcast are you getting Sheffield Shield helmet regulations on? That's great.
I mean, kind of moving on. Ben, there was a chaotic finish in the Leicester Derby game. Mickey Arthur was left fuming. So I genuinely don't understand this. You're going to have to explain it.
Yeah. So the issue was, so with how the Leicester innings ended, Derbyshire expected to have 3 overs to chase 54 to win, and were fully intent on having a go at what is essentially 3 runs a ball. And then it turns out that actually I think they had read the regulations wrong. So you do lose the 2 hours even if it's in the last hour. But
2
they
overs,
are.
Yeah.
The 2 overs even if it's in the last hour. But it is very confusingly worded. Both, I mean, I think it probably, you can just about work it through and make sense of it, but in both the playing conditions and the laws, there's like a lot of sort of like calculation that goes on into working it out. And while there are some different things that can happen in the last hour, because they're already into the last 16 overs, that means you do lose the 2 of them, and you don't get that sort of that minimum overs in the last day that you're supposed to.
Yeah, so Derbyshire briefly thought they could chase 54 off 3 overs, and they found out they couldn't.
Yeah, and then Heyder Ali blocks out a maiden instead. But you had Mickey Arthur sort of charging into the match referee's office saying like, "Why have we only got 1 over? Why don't we have 3 overs?" And he does this a fair bit, and it's good to see.
But I think the best bit
Arthur
is they
furious.
spent 20 minutes arguing over this instead of just playing cricket. Excellent. And just finally on the domestic game, Sam Billings revealed that he had 2 operations to remove skin cancer from his chest over the winter. He tweeted, last October, I had a bit of a reality check, 2 operations to remove skin cancer off my chest, put cricket on the back burner for a little while, and into perspective, we're all pretty blasé when it comes to putting sun cream on, but it really has to change. As cricketers, we're exposed to the sun so much, and we can all be more diligent. Cases have doubled over the last 20 years and will continue to double again over the next 20 years. There's a really good interview with him where he talks about his experience in a lot of depth in the Telegraph. So I highly recommend you go and give that a read. The IPL is still going strong. The finish of the week was in the game between Sunrisers and Rajasthan. Josh Buttler hit 95 for the Royals as they posted 214 for 2 off their 20. They looked in complete control of their defence, with Hyderabad needing 41 off the last 12 balls. But Glenn Phillips and Abdul Samad got Hyderabad over the line. There was some pretty suspect death bowling and decision-making from Sanju Samson, with impact player, overseas bowler Oban McCoy only bowling 1 over. Friend of the podcast, Matt Roller, wrote a really good piece about the dangers of Yorker bowling. So there were 6 or 7 missed Yorkers in those final 2 overs. Most of those went for 6. And there's quite a good stat from his piece that said that even when you nail a Yorker in the IPL this year, you still go at more than a run a ball. And if you just miss, you go at like 14 in the deaths. So it's a high risk. And those And they basically kept on going for the Yorker. I think the first 3 balls from the penultimate over all went for 6. First 2 were missed Yorkers. Phil Salt's had a good week from an England perspective. He was player of the match for Delhi as they beat RCB. He's got 2 50s in 3 games. Norkir is unavailable for Delhi at the moment, and Delhi have opted to pick an all overseas top 4 with Warner, Salt, Marsh and Rousseau, and it's working pretty well for them at the moment. Harry Brook is having a less good time. He's been dropped from the Hyderabad side following a pretty miserable run of form since his 100.
He should come home.
You said this straight after his 100.
You don't need this. Not now. Come home. We'll get some runs.
There's some stuff this week about the preparation that sides are going to have for the Test summer. Basically, they're not going to play any games. So Australia and India have just decided not to play games when they could have played games. I think Australia
playing golf, aren't they?
They're playing golf in the northwest, and India are just having a couple of training days. You don't need to play cricket before Test matches.
So it would seem.
Yeah.
And Joe Root continues to hopefully have a nice holiday with his family.
He got to be on the pitch for that game. So
Did he?
So he played, but he didn't bat or bowl.
But he was in the first 11.
He was in the first 11.
And then
so they were only 2 down. So,
Only 2 down.
so if he's played, he might play the next game.
He might play the next game.
Oh,
yeah.
that'd be nice.
Yeah. I mean, he did play this game. He just didn't do anything.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, feature.
Just on that World Test Championship final that's creeping up, Ishan Kishan has been named in the India Test squad as KL Rahul's injury replacement.
It's funny how it goes, all this stuff. I watched a lot of the Mumbai RCB game yesterday. In fact, I watched pretty much all of it. And, big game, 2 big teams, both of them striving to get in that top 4. 200 plays 200. They get it easily with Yadav being ridiculous, 80 odd and 30 odd balls. And yet in your roundup, it sort of doesn't even really make the cut because it's all just this mass of stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's hard to really pick out significant sort of changing moments or moments where the momentum of the tournament shifts one way or the other because it's just this vast content circus. And then at some point in a few days' time, the final 4 will emerge from a league table where still I think anybody can make it. And on the one hand, that's a great feather in the cap of the tournament because it's a relatively level sort of playing field. On the other, it sort of indicates the amount of chance and randomness that is priced into T20 cricket. And so it's undoubtedly great fun. And I sat there and enjoyed 4 hours of it. 4 hours. 4 hours
if you're lucky.
Yesterday.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, it was 4 and a bit actually yesterday. So don't get me wrong, I'm sitting there and enjoying it. I'm soaking it up as well. But I'm also sort of aware at the same time of just how fleeting it all is. It just sort of flutters off the page, Yadav did an incredible thing, but Yadav does incredible things.
I think the reason
Brucey got runs. Oh right, did he?
But he gets runs every week now. So.
Exactly.
I think the reason, there must be some listeners who wonder why do we talk so little about the IPL during the IPL. I think fundamentally we watch it, as a we from an English perspective, English cricket fans just watch it very differently to how it's followed in India. So I think for English cricket fans, the majority of them, they watch the IPL kind of like how you described. They look at the team sheet at 2:30, see who's in it. It's like, oh, Butler's playing. I'll watch that for a bit. Whereas in India, people follow it so closely as football fans here follow the English Premier League. Every game is of massive significance, and there are narratives and really interesting tactical dimensions to every single game that you could and we could talk about. But I don't think our audience generally watches the IPL like that. I think that's the reason why we don't look at the IPL in such granular detail. Because if you could spend an hour a day genuinely on it. There is so much that happens.
It has been unusually compact this year, that table. It isn't usually that squeezed with 4 teams on 10 points, 1 on 11, 1 on 12. As you say, from Gujarat Titans basically in maybe the bottom 2 a little bit of distance. The rest pick 3 from 7. But I think it's also just the 1 game a day thing. I find all of those tournaments actually quite hard to follow and to almost to keep remembering why each game is important and how each game is impacted.
So would you prefer the T20 Blast model where you got 9 going on at the same time, none of them being televised?
Well, to an extent, maybe it's tricky. I don't know what the perfect model is, but I know that say with with leagues where there is like a block of fixtures at a time, they don't have to be at the same time, but over the course of 3 days, you know this when they're going to be. You can look at the table at the start and at the end, and they'll be like notes be different. You can see exactly what's happened. That is a lot harder to do in the IPL, I think. And with this isn't an IPL dig. This is more of a how T20 tournaments have ended up, the format they generally take. I do find difficult to follow a thread all the way through sometimes.
I will say as well, with the IPL, you just kind of have to pace yourself. Like if you're not following as closely as the Indian audience is, you've got so many weeks of games that are 4 hours in a day, 2 games, that's 8 hours of cricket in a day. That's a test match. You know, you've got to pace yourself, because otherwise you're just not going to last it.
Bang on. Ben,
the first Ireland-Bangladesh ODI happened yesterday at Chelmsford. It probably passed a lot of people by, but what happened and why was it so important?
Well, fundamentally, it was washed out, which means South Africa have qualified automatically for the Cricket World Cup. There was, I think, if you follow Irish cricket, you learn to appreciate a certain amount of irony, and there was quite a lot of irony in this for 2 reasons. One is that this was technically a home game for Ireland, which they'd moved to Chelmsford because they thought that would give them a better chance of getting all 3 games on, because they needed to win all 3 to try and keep their hopes of automatic qualification alive. And it was actually it wasn't raining in Malahide yesterday.
Oh no!
And then also
in the microclimate at Chelmsford, it pissed down.
Yeah, well, there was a thunderstorm that just rolled all across the country. I heard on the radio there were 8,000 lightning strikes in England yesterday, and I think about 25 of those were in and around the Chelmsford area.
It's because the Tories fell in the councils around my hometown. That's why.
That's a lovely sunshine in South London yesterday.
But it also didn't feel like a home game, because there were, it was a packed house and entirely Bangladesh fans. I didn't spot a single Ireland fan. There was the whole day. They're actually, I won't talk about the flights to Southend Airport on this podcast. But yeah,
well, I mean, you've mentioned it. You might as well.
Well, there are no flights from Ireland to Southend Airport, which would be where you were going to if you were trying to be an Ireland fan getting to Chelmsford quickly. So
I disagree. You go to Stansted and get to Chelmsford in half an hour, quite easy peasy.
I guess they could have done that, and the Ireland fans chose not to.
Also City Airport as well in East London, easy peasy.
Yeah. But the atmosphere was.
Was there anyone there?
It was absolutely packed.
Right.
With Bangladesh fans.
Yeah. Okay. I figured that would be the move from East London.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a big Bangladeshi community in East London, and it got me thinking actually that there is. So Bangladesh last toured England to play England in a bilateral for getting global tournaments in 2010, and they're not scheduled to do so in the current Future Tours program. So the earliest they will do it is 2027. So that's 17 years between tours for one of the most followed cricket teams in the world, and a very good cricket team as well, especially in white ball cricket. And we talk about wanting to re-engage certain audiences, and the fact that the British Asian population in the UK play a lot of recreational cricket and aren't as embedded within the county game and within those structures, and that the 100 has not had the same impact as it has with different age groups and with the women's game. And you think actually there is that this audience there love cricket, and they just don't love the England team because Bangladesh is their team. And if you bring Bangladesh over, you get them into a county ground, maybe you get them signed up to a mailing list. They see, oh, there's this other thing on, I can go and do that. That could be how you draw that audience out. And it feels like a missed opportunity for it to have been so long. I mean, we were there at the 2019 World Cup for those amazing atmospheres they created for when Bangladesh were playing there. They had a brilliant Champions Trophy campaign in 2017 when they made the semi-finals. They absolutely deserve at least a full limited overs tour of England, if not a full all formats tour. And I hope that arrives before too long.
Absolutely. Josh Little, by the way, is playing the ODIs there, but he's going back to the IPL instead of playing the Lord's Test.
That's a shame.
That's a big shame.
Yeah.
How silly! He's gonna regret that.
I get the feeling though it's more resting him before the qualifiers rather than so.
It's a Lord's Test match.
Yeah, so they were really confident they were going to win these 3 matches then, because they'd announced that before the first ODI happened. Then when they didn't know they were going to have to play the qualifier.
Yeah, that's true.
That is.
But he's being paid a lot of money to play for Gujarat, and he's a part of their team, and they're doing really well. Like an IPL final or a Lord's final, or a Lord's Test match. Genuinely, for a young guy whose his career is going to be defined by what he does in T20 cricket, not in Test cricket. Ireland play maybe 2 or 3 Test matches a year on average.
They played 3 in the last month,
but they didn't play any for a few years before that. Literally a few years before that.
In the unlikely scenario that they get to the final, the final takes place on the 28th of May, and the first Test match is 4 days later, 3 days later?
Yeah.
Jump on a plane, come home and play it.
Mm.
You bowled 4 overs if you're lucky in that final. Come home and play it.
But
It's a Lord's Test match.
if it's compared to being fit and firing for a World Cup qualifier, and he's balancing a Lord Test match versus having the best possible chance of getting to a World Cup, I can also see. I mean,
Why
none of this is
are
ideal,
you being
but-
so doom laden about it? I mean, the kid can get through a few overs in a Test match. Or
Depends how
they
well
can
England
even
bat.
manage his workload, but he's far and away their best fast bowler. It's just garbage that, quite rightly, they are awarded this Test match, this landmark moment, or second landmark moment, and he's comfortably their best bowler, and he's not going to be there. It's just rubbish.
Katya, what is your moment of the week?
Babar Azam and or Pakistan as a whole. So Babar Azam scored 100 in the 4th ODI, which I believe was on Friday. And it was his first century in ODIs since June last year. And within that, he smashed the record of being the quickest to 5,000 ODI runs in terms of innings. So he's the first one to do it in under 100. He's done it in 97. Hashim Amla's the next one on 101. And it was just a reminder of how good Babar Azam is at ODIs. He scored 5,089 runs in those 97 innings, 98 now actually, with 1,800s, 26 50s, and he averages just under 60. Like, he's absolutely incredible at ODIs. And he's part of a wider, obviously leads a Pakistan side that is seriously good. When they won that, they became number 1 in the world for the first time ever, albeit very, very briefly, because it wouldn't be Pakistan if they didn't lose the next match quite heavily. And their top order is Fakhar Zaman, Imam, although stuff going on with Imam, Baba, Rizwan. That's insane. That's an insane top order. Their bowling attack, Afridi, Naseem, Isanullah. It's absolutely ridiculous. And they haven't got any ODI scheduled now, I don't think, until the World Cup, which is a massive shame. Because their box office when they lose, their box office when they win. They should be playing more ODIs. So that's my daily rant about the schedule not being right. And just as a tangent to that, I've been really confused by Shan Masood in this series. I do not understand why Shan Masood doesn't have a fantastic ODI record. He averages 55 in List A cricket, tears up Pakistan domestic List A cricket every year. I know he hasn't been given a load of opportunities, and when he has been given opportunities, he hasn't taken them. But I don't understand how. You look at him and you think you should have a brilliant ODI record, and I don't understand why you don't. Whether this stuff with Imam continues, I'm not exactly sure of the ins and outs with Imam, but he wasn't playing the final one. Whether he was injured or dropped, I don't know.
I think they just want to give Masood as many opportunities to nail down the spot as the spare batter in the squad as possible.
But I kind of hope, for Pakistan's sake, I think that should be Masood's last chance. I think Abdullah Shafiq, he's got calibre in international cricket, is yet to show exactly what he can do in ODI cricket. But I think if you're looking for sort of a young, vibrant talent to sort of take that team forward, Masood has had his chances, and especially if they are considering breaking up that top 3, or if it doesn't make sense if you give him a go at opener to try and make good of it, but they can't be thinking about breaking up that top 3. Surely that has been the foundation of why they've got to number 1 in the world, is those 3. Masood has, it was great that he got his comeback. There have been a few brief glimpses of it, but I think it's probably time to move on from that, given they do have young batters who are sort of coming up through the ranks.
Well, they've got too many openers, don't they? Because they've got Shafiq, who should really open in ODIs, and they've bumped Rizwan down to 5, which he's not happy about. And they need a 4, and neither of them are really natural 4s. But that's the lowest they could probably bat in a batting order. So they're the 2 best spare batters they've got, but they're not naturally where they need them to bat, I guess.
I guess on your question about why has he done so well in List A cricket but not ODIs, I'd say that average is amazing. That strike rate isn't for List A cricket, and I think Pakistan, if you're going to be a top 3 batter in ODI cricket, if you're striking at 82 in domestic cricket, that's probably not quite enough.
Baba strikes at less than 90 in ODIs.
But it's more that if you're striking 82 in domestic cricket, you're probably not going to be doing that.
Yeah,
in
I
Test
guess.
cricket.
I still think he should have better ODI numbers than he does, and I still think he should have had maybe not a long career, but definitely a much more successful ODI career than he has had. And I think it's a shame that he hasn't been able to convert those opportunities, because I think he would be really good to watch. Just last thing on that Pakistan ODI, the fourth ODI anyway, Shaheen Shah scored something like 20 something runs off 7 balls in the last 2 overs. Absolutely brilliant. And I hope he continues.
The all-rounder.
If they go to India and win the thing later in the year.
That'd be amazing, wouldn't it? It'd be amazing. The perfect way for international cricket to end.
Yeah, go out in a bang, literally.
It was the last of the 1 million matches that Pakistan have played against New Zealand since last year.
Yeah.
They've played about, I don't even know, I've lost track, but they're always playing New Zealand.
They've already played 10 ODIs against each other this year.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's 8. There've been only 3 Rachael Heyhoe trophy games since last week's show, but they've all been eventful. There was a tie that we'll hear about in a minute. Nadine de Klerk took a 7th for the Blaze against the Diamonds as they were bowled out for 63. And then the Sunrisers only went 1 run better as they were bowled out for 64 by the South East Stars. I spoke to Tara Norris earlier, who's had a very eventful few months, the American who plays in the IPL. Tara, great to have you on the show. You've had a pretty unique couple of years, contract in the UK, you become a US international, you go to the first ever WPL and you take the first ever WPL fifer. How was the WPL compared to your expectations, if you had any expectations in the first place?
Yeah, the last few weeks have been a bit of a roller coaster, to be honest. India was incredible. The tournament was fantastic. Like you said, it was, I guess, quite a unique experience from my point of view, and definitely an opportunity which I didn't think I'd get in my career. So just to be there was brilliant. The franchise Delhi Capitals were fantastic. And the level of cricket was, I obviously was really impressed by the 100. But the IPL, I think, has just raised new standards for all franchise cricket in terms of the competitiveness, the overseas they got, the professionalism around the tournament. A brilliant few weeks, and lots of learnings, and that was my first time to India as well. So from a cultural point of view as well, I absolutely loved it.
I mean, that Delhi team was seriously star-studded. I think there were a few games where you fielded 11 international players. What was it like playing under someone like Meg Lanning, who's used to winning a lot of games?
Yeah, there were a lot of pinch-me moments just looking around our squad, to be honest. Yeah, just filled with world-class players, really. Obviously never played with Meg before, so I think her experience has a lot of, I guess, belief in the team, knowing that you're being led by possibly one of the most successful leaders in the game. And just her level of calmness was really quite refreshing for me, and just to have that faith and bounce ideas off was really, really comforting for me. And I guess the trust that you had within the team was ridiculous, really.
And what was it like going into an overseas tournament when you've not been, as you say, you've not been to the country before? Like, there's a whole kind of acclimatizing to a new environment, let alone the cricket side of things. I imagine, was there a language barrier between you and a lot of the players as well? Like, a lot of things going on as well as the cricket itself.
Yeah, I guess we had probably a week before the first game just to prep, and that was the first time I played an outdoor game since the previous September. So I was feeling a little bit undercooked, to say the least. But just being outside and obviously training and playing different conditions. Actually, our local players spoke really good English. So for me, I was trying to learn as much Hindi as I could, really, and just try and really embrace the whole culture. I guess new teams and franchise cricket, you're playing with people that you've never played with before. So actually, there isn't loads of time for the team to gel. But I think we did it pretty successfully. And I think, especially in franchise cricket, the teams that tend to go all the way are the ones that gel really quickly and I guess perform really well together on the pitch. So I think we had that on our side as well.
I read that you needed a bit of persuading in the first place to even put your hat in the ring. So how did that happen? How did you end up put your name in the hat for the auction?
I guess it wasn't persuading. It was, so my domestic team, Lancashire Thunder, we had a pre-season tour to Dubai in India. Actually at the same time as the WPL was, just coincidentally. So I knew if I put my name into the draft, but obviously jeopardising the pre-season tour. And I guess in terms of selection and being new to the club, I didn't really want to put a foot wrong, basically. And just sort of through various conversations with other players and staff and coaches, it seemed silly to not put your name in the draft, especially with this associate rule. Had it not been the case, I probably wouldn't have bothered, if I'm being honest. But I guess the associate rule, I felt like I had a slight advantage, and I thought I'd be silly to not put my name into the hat. And then, after a few slight admin issues with USA Cricket, I think I just put my name into the draft, or the auction, sorry, maybe with like a 3-hour deadline. Like, it was really last minute. I was up at night communicating with USA, different time zone, trying to get the right login details. Obviously it worked out really well in the end.
Obviously, you're going to be slightly biased with this question, but the associate rule is it looked like a very forward-thinking idea that's not really around in other leagues. Is that something? Obviously, you benefited from it here, but is that something you think that cricket leagues, men's and women's game going forward, should look to consider?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, they had this in the WPL. I think a few years ago in the BBL, they had like a rookie contract available for associates. So you not necessarily play, but it was more of a development role, which in my opinion, I thought that was what my role would be. I thought it was purely a development gig. I'm probably not going to have a game. That's fine. I'm going to learn as much as I can. And it's a shame that other associates weren't picked up from that point of view as well. I think maybe like an associate, or in the 100, we had a wild card last year. I think that's a brilliant concept and a great idea, and it's a chance to showcase your players that maybe wouldn't have that opportunity. You look at tournaments like Fairbreak, you see some hidden gems in there, and I think tournaments like that will hopefully expose those players. But yeah, obviously I'm all for it. I'm obviously a little bit biased, and it's worked out pretty well for me. But I think just that exposure and the opportunity that a lot of players lack is brilliant. And if an injury happens, tournament cricket as well is really fickle, and anything kind of can happen. So it just takes one injury, or maybe a matchup, and you bring a player in, they do really well, and I think it's brilliant for that player and their country they're representing as well.
And then coming back to the UK, you had an amazing game the other day. It was a tied game. You took, I think, 2 wickets and 2 balls at one point. There was a bit of rain, DLS, late innings runs rather. Just one hell of a game. Talk us through it.
Yeah, it was an emotional day, to say the least. I think we literally, were faced with every type of climate, every condition. And it was a draw, which obviously was quite frustrating at the time. From one point, I didn't know we were going to win the game, to the next, we're thinking we're going to win it. Frustrating. It's been quite a frustrating start to our domestic season. But definitely, hopefully quite a good game for the neutrals, and hopefully an entertaining game.
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to ask you as well about one of your teammates who people are pretty excited about at the moment, Mahika Gore. She's played international cricket for the UAE. She was in the Fairbreak competition. For people who've not seen her bowl before, tell us a little bit about Mahika. What is she like as a cricketer?
Mahika is a very exciting young cricketer. Left arm, very tall. I think she's 6'2". In swing bowler. She had a really successful Fairbreak, and obviously I've seen her over the winter. She's only 16, or maybe just turned 17. So full of so much potential, and she's like a sponge. She just wants to learn as much as she can, and constantly asking questions. She's a brilliant character, and she's also got some really good card tricks. So when we've had some away games, she's got out the card tricks, and she's a very good magician. So we call her Magic Meeks.
Well, I think Izzy Wong went viral when she was pretty young, doing Rubik's Cube tricks on Sky. So maybe that's a good way to make a name for yourself. It's just fine. I was going to ask about the US stuff. I mean, obviously that created headlines a couple of years ago. How's that looking in the horizon? Is there a tournament coming up soon? Is World Cup qualification still the ultimate dream?
Yeah, I think it's really hard with USA Cricket. There's obviously a bit of a financial issue at the minute, and I guess in terms of getting fixtures and keeping ODI status is pretty challenging at the minute. I know we've got T20 Americas qualifiers coming up end of the year, which is for me a little bit touch and go with our domestic season. But obviously, I want to play as much as I can for USA Cricket and still contribute where I can. So there's a few things coming up this year, just still to be confirmed by ICC, I think.
Cool, awesome. Well, thanks a lot for your time, Tara, and best of luck with the rest of the summer.
Thank you very much.
A question to finish from WG Rumble Pants on Twitter. All Stars, Dynamos, and the 100 are aimed at getting more kids playing and watching cricket. How do we get more adults to play and watch cricket? So I'm going to talk about men's club cricket first. I actually think that there are structures in place that are pretty good for getting people in for the first time. Talked about it on the show before, but last man stands, lots of people play that who haven't played cricket at any level at all before. And that's, you can get a game in on 1.5 hours on an evening, weeknight evening. And then there was some discussion in the comments underneath that question, people talking about shortening club games in the weekend. I think it's fine. Like, if people want to, cricket is a long game, and I think people should be able to play that if they want to.
What do you play?
Saturdays? I play 50. Half our games are 50 over games, half our games are 100 over time games. But I think if someone's coming in for the first time, don't play 50 overs. Something like 30, 35 is fine. But that is what the lowest leagues have. So, and Sunday cricket is often 35, 40 over cricket as well. I think...
But Sunday cricket is not nearly as available as it used to be, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And progressive clubs have these kinds of options, but less progressive clubs don't. Less progressive clubs have the fours playing the same version of cricket as the twos and the ones. And so I think firstly, clubs' doors are wide open to as many new players or returning players as they can possibly get their hands on, obviously. And there's actually still a large number of cricket clubs across the country. So you're never going to be that far away from one if you do want to get involved. But I do slightly disagree with you. I do think there are problems with flexibility with certain clubs and certain leagues as well. And, you know, if I was coming back to the game and I was going to come and play for your club, 100 overs a day on a Saturday, that to me is prohibitive unless I'm absolutely obsessed with the thing, and most people aren't. And I think that question of how much you do play on a Saturday, I do slightly disagree with you. That I think there needs to be a bit more flexibility within it. If you separate off the Premier Leagues, the real top leagues, the sort of semi-pro leagues, if you separate them off, you play all day cricket, that's fine, of course, and you should, because you're striving to become something very good, very, very good. But I think below that, and I've played second team cricket on and off for 30 years, and I don't think there's anybody that would be less motivated to play in my team for playing 40 over cricket rather than 50 over cricket. We now actually play 45 over cricket, which I can get with. But I think 40 over cricket is still one hell of a day out. You can still take 7 for, you can still make 120 if it's your day. I think that does need to be addressed, and it's conversations that are had within clubs and within leagues and within committees. And I know that these conversations are being had, but you are challenged by the sort of the legacy traditional position that's occupied by a lot of committee members who do incredible selfless work for the game, and those who are of a different era and therefore carrying slightly different priorities.
And just my perspective of having tried to get into club cricket as an adult, I think that there are options out there, and if you knew everything that was available, you would be able to find the one that suited you. It's just the difficulty of actually finding what that is. Like, it's difficult to find out when you are looking at a club, you know, what type of cricket do they play on the weekend, and then also if I do, you know, end up turning up, what sort of role you actually get to play. Cricket is one of the worst games to play if you're rubbish, if you're rubbish and not really involved, right? And there are regulations that could be put in place to do that. That was quite an interesting discussion actually below that question that we got, suggesting that if you say you have a 35 over game with a maximum of 6 overs per bowler, then that forces you to have 6 bowlers, which just brings more people in. You could also maybe do something like that. Everyone either has to bowl or bat in the top 6 or 7, say, and then that also involves everyone in the game. And, you know, a canny club and a good club would see someone new turn up and think, we've got to involve this person, because even if they're no good now, they might be at some point, or, you know, we just need the numbers for the door. But also some clubs, you know, trying to get a team out is such a struggle that you will like that there will be times when you will happily accept an 11th member, even if maybe you know deep down that what they're going to be doing is kind of fielding deep point just to plug a gap and make the numbers up so you don't have to, forfeit something.
Yeah, I don't think there's. I think if you're playing third team cricket, fourth team cricket, and second team cricket up to a point, I think there's a recognition that you try and give people a game more often than not. And I don't think it's so cutthroat that your best players always have to bat in the top 5. You get 1 or 2 club lifers for sure. They only ever open and so on. But I think there's a recognition that if people are paying their subs, if they're involved in the club, then you try and get them a game. What do you play on? You play weekend cricket, right?
I've actually had to stop, but
But traditionally,
yeah.
And what format do you play?
45, 50 overs. There's
straight result.
Yeah,
cricket.
one curse game. I remember conceding 350 in the field in 50 overs. That was really bad.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Really tough gig. What I was going to say with the women's side of village cricket is it's just really hard on a website to see whether the club even has a women's team.
I remember you saying this last year when you were looking for a new club.
Yeah. You have to dig so hard to find, first of all, if there's a women's team. Second of all, when they train, who's a contact to try and get involved. It's really, really difficult. So unless you, A, have the time to do that digging, and B, are committed enough to starting cricket or joining another club to do that, it's actually really inaccessible. And you were saying, like, third team, fourth team cricket, there's one team. There's not, we don't do second, third, fourth team. There's normally just one team. And trying to actually find that one team can be really, really difficult, let alone whether it's a club that you actually want to be in, or, what the standard of that club is.
Wisden.com. Get it on. Create a directory on Wisden.com.
But even I think that directory would be quite hard to create, because some teams have like a women's team, but they don't advertise it on their website, or they have a Facebook post from 4 years ago that indicates they did at one point have a women's team. Or the club that I joined was huge. Like, it's a huge club, but they only started their women's team last year. So there's still that kind of, I don't know, do they, don't they, am I going to go and there's just going to be a load of, really good professional guys playing in the net. So, you want to make sure you're going into the right environment as well. So it can be really, really challenging. But I have also played T20 cricket with women's leagues and that kind of stuff. So I think there's more variety of what you want to play in women's cricket. And also, just on a side note to the actual playing, I've done training sessions alongside like men's training sessions. Women's training sessions are a lot more fun, or they look a lot more fun than men's sessions. We're still playing diamond cricket, all that kind of stuff. It's really fun.
I haven't done a training session since 1997.
We go for a net together every now and then. Does that not count?
That's a jolly boys outing.
Yeah.
Yes.
I agree with everything that everyone said, but I think the major barrier, that was the reason why I was a little bit. I think the over stuff, makes some difference, but I don't think if the threes are playing 35 overs or 40 overs, that's going to stop someone joining a club. I think the biggest thing is actually like cost of kit. Kit is so expensive. If you've not played cricket before, like a few years ago, I decided to get into golf. And like the thing that stopped me for years was like, well, I don't know if I'm actually going to like it. So am I going to spend shitloads of money on a sport that I just don't know I'm going to enjoy? And I ended up getting into it because a mate was selling me his like third-hand clubs, and I got them for 50 quid, and that's how I started. I think it's the same with cricket. If you've not played it before, you might enjoy watching it. I think cricket probably has, as much as any other sport, you have so many people who love watching it but have never tried playing it, and I think the kit is such a barrier to entry.
Could I just add on that? This might get me into trouble, but I've spoken to lots of people within the industry about bat making and people who sell bats as well as make them. And the difference between grade 1 willow, grade 2 willow and grade 3 willow is often a lot of money, but it's not always necessarily reflected in the quality of the gear itself, which is not to say that people deliberately mark stuff up, but you can get really, really good grade 2 willow bats, really, really good grade 3 willow bats if it feels right in your hands. If anyone is ever going to go and buy a bat, I strongly suggest go and actually pick it up. I wouldn't advise you to go and buy it, off online and so on. Go and actually get hold of it and check it out, because there's there's some brilliant mid-range bats out there. You don't have to spend 400 or 500 quid necessarily.
Just very briefly on that costing. Part of the reason why I've had to give up playing village cricket at the weekends is just the sheer cost of actually joining a club and paying your subs for the season. I think my one was 200 quid for the year, plus match fees, plus 15 quid behind the bar, plus whatever extra you spend on travel that weekend getting there. And I know that's fairly normal, but it's just very expensive
No, really,
to
really
even
adds up.
join a club. And if you're looking at getting more people into the game in current climate, that's another thing that's quite difficult.
100%. Well, my first game of the season was rained off at 11:45 after we got there nice and early, which was a shame, but the weather forecast is looking better for this week. Anyway, that is the end of this week's show. Cheers, Katya. Cheers, Phil. Cheers, Ben. This has been a very long episode of the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. Well done for getting the end. See you next week.